In the ancient world, the fall of a city marked not merely the end of military conflict. It heralded a new and harrowing chapter in the lives of the women left behind. These women were far from being mere collateral damage. They emerged as living embodiments of their city's downfall, their suffering meticulously orchestrated as a direct affront to the very essence of their identities. Such anguish was not an incidental consequence of war. It was a calculated strategy employed by victors to dismantle more than just their bodies. It aimed to obliterate their very sense of self. This narrative is seldom recorded in heroic epics or grand historical accounts of philosophers. Rather, it belongs to a concealed history of humiliation, where the harshest retributions were reserved not for the defeated soldiers, but for their wives, daughters, and mothers, who stood as enduring symbols of their city's disgrace. They were forcibly taken into slavery, subjected to beatings, and paraded before onlookers as prizes of conquest. The destruction of their dignity became the ultimate trophy for the victors. The punishments meted out to these women were not confined to a cold prison cell. They were public spectacles designed to crush the spirit as effectively as they broke the flesh. The intention was to inflict wounds that would leave scars far deeper than any physical injury could. Now consider the nature of the punishment inflicted upon a woman in public for a perceived offense. What happens when the cruelties of war evolve into a grotesque form of humiliation, articulated through mundane objects like a radish or a fig? The ritualization of such punishment began with an artifact so unremarkable that its very ordinariness heightened the horror of the act. A knobby radish or a dried fig could become instruments of profound humiliation. This was not merely an infliction of pain. It was an act of mockery and grotesque intimacy that rendered the accused utterly vulnerable. The woman, stripped from the waist down, had nowhere to seek refuge. Her hands were forcibly restrained, and all eyes of the crowd, filled with predatory anticipation, focused on her shameful predicament. A magistrate or perhaps a spurned husband would announce her alleged crime: infidelity, seduction, or some other violation of societal expectations. Then, with a slow, deliberate intention, the act would commence. This was not a mere execution or a medical procedure. It was a symbolic act of violation that turned the accused into living evidence of her own disgrace. The immediate physical torment was excruciating: a hard radish pressing and bruising her flesh, or a dried fig tearing at her insides, leaving hot, burning abrasions in its wake. Yet the true agony lay not in the fleeting physical pain, but in the deeper psychological wound. The knowledge that her body had been transformed into a public spectacle, a living emblem of communal contempt. In some instances, these objects would be retained or even displayed, amplifying her humiliation further. A common food item, once a part of her everyday life, served now as an indelible symbol of her dishonor, marking her pure body as tainted and publicly defiled. The ramifications of such punishment extended far beyond the immediate trauma. In an age devoid of antiseptics, the raw wounds on her body were susceptible to infection, potentially leading to prolonged suffering and lasting scars. Socially, this act obliterated her dignity and privacy. A woman who had once entered the agora as a member of her community now left as an object of ridicule. Her family bore the weight of her shame, and her children's futures were irrevocably altered. In Athens, where reputation and social standing were paramount, this form of bodily degradation acted as an instrument of social death. If such humiliation awaited women for supposed transgressions, what then was the consequence for those who merely displayed defiance? What unfolded when public shaming bordered on performance art? The act known as bodizo represented the most extreme form of public disgrace. Rather than occurring in dark confinement, it took place in the bustling heart of the city, the Athenian agora, frequently trafficked space filled with merchants, philosophers, and citizens. To be dragged into this arena, not as a free individual but as an object of ridicule, epitomized the pinnacle of degradation. The condemned woman was stripped of her clothes, sometimes entirely, while at other times she was left with only tattered rags that offered little semblance of modesty. Bound to a post, her body was exposed to the relentless Mediterranean sun, amplifying her humiliation in a society that held female modesty in the highest regard. Public nudity inflicted a deeper wound than any physical punishment could, as it intended to serve as a calculated spectacle designed to heighten her disgrace. Neighbors, traders, and even slaves would pass by, observing her not as a person, but as a cautionary tale. Children might giggle, the elderly would point, and some bystanders would spit or hurl insults. The guards remained passive, for the punishment thrived on the active participation of the crowd. The physical torment was ceaseless. Hours spent under the merciless sun blistered her skin while her throat parched under relentless thirst. Hunger gnawed at her insides as weakness consumed her limbs, forcing her into shameful postures that she could not conceal. Dust from the marketplace settled on her sweat-drenched body, creating a final layer of filth. Insects crawled freely over her wounds, eyes, and mouth. As time dragged on, the grotesqueness of the spectacle, only magnified a once respected citizen, was reduced to a public warning. A living testament to what awaited those who dared to dishonor their city, their husbands, or their gods. However, the gravest wound inflicted was never physical, it was the erasure of her dignity. In Athenian society, a woman's worth was inextricably linked to her modesty and household reputation. The brutal exposure destroyed both simultaneously. The shame of public nudity overshadows even the scars left by physical violence as the mental scars deeply permeate her home life, casting shadows of whispers that poisoned her family's honor and left a stigma that would endure forever. Duration of this abhorrent punishment varied. Some women endured it for hours, others for an entire day, and a few did not survive at all. They might collapse from heat or be left to die, as the Athenians believed that the punishment was not deemed complete until humiliation reached its zenith and burned itself into public memory. Boudiza was not designed merely to punish the physical body. Its craft lay in its intention to obliterate the spirit, transforming a woman's flesh into a public statement. You do not belong to yourself. You belong to the city, which holds the power to strip you bare at will. But what could be more dehumanizing than such public exposure? A punishment that did not merely divest her of clothing, but threatened to strip her of her very identity. The final act of disgrace, the shaving of a woman's head, stands as one of the most profound humiliations in ancient Greece. Hair was not merely a feature of appearance, it was a potent symbol of pride, identity, and femininity. To remove it was to strip away her honor. Consequently, head shaving, often accompanied by brutal beatings, became a stark expression of punishment for women accused of adultery or other forms of insubordination. This punishment was not intended to inflict mere physical pain, sought to shackle her with lifelong shame. Publicly shorn of her hair, she was left defenseless and exposed, marked as permanently disgraced in a society where long hair signified beauty and virtue. This act of degradation was compounded by physical violence. Women were struck with rods, belts, and fists, leaving their bodies adorned with bruises, while their once lovely hair, now forcibly removed, marked them with a public stigma of dishonor. For enslaved women, this brutal treatment was a common practice. Their masters would shave their heads to distinguish them from free women, utilizing violence to cement their submission. The cruelty of this punishment lay in its inherent permanence. Wounds might eventually heal, but hair could take months, if not years, to regrow, if it ever returned to its former glory. During this period, the woman was unable to hide her disgrace. Every step into public space became a reminder of her loss. In ancient Greece, losing one's hair under punitive measures was tantamount to losing one's very identity. Coupled with the brutality of physical beatings, this stripping away of femininity served as a continuous and brutal reminder that a woman's body was never truly her own. It belonged to her husband, her master, or the state, which could take from her not just her dignity, but also the very symbols of her womanhood, leaving her with nothing but the indelible, visible marks of their abuse. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to support our work and never miss an upload. Like this video, drop a comment, and share it with others to show your support and help us grow this historical community.